All right. All right. What a way to follow up. But we have James Davis in the house from Brooklyn College.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's good to see you. George, how things go overnight?
Absolutely fantastic. You know, I watched everything. It was a great night. We really it was really fantastic. It was really
Union's
good.
pretty good, right?
It's amazing. It was really fantastic. I was really into it. Lawrence has been my man here, backing me up. I won't take up too much time. I just wanted to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and it's been really phenomenal. And James will take over. We're in good hands. We're in very good hands with James, and we'll talk later. But it's been fantastic. I thank you, of course, for all the work we did together. It was the best. And all right, Lawrence, you take care, man. Thank you so much. James, take it away. Good night, everybody.
George, thanks so much for everything that you did, putting the event together, and for taking the graveyard shift. Appreciate it on behalf of all PSC members. Thank you for your work. All right, have a good evening or morning, whichever one it is for you. PSC members, good morning. Happy Thursday. It's good to see you all again. And we have some good programming coming up. I'll mention the first clip. Let me just make a note real quick, though, that for those of you who are teaching your Thursday classes, maybe you're up scrambling to put the last touches on that syllabus that you hadn't quite polished up over the summer. Good luck out there today to all my faculty colleagues. Wanted to follow up on something that came up during the segments on health and safety yesterday. Obviously, if anyone is called back into work and you're finding unsafe work conditions, the union wants to know about that immediately. And you should contact the PSC, you should contact the health and safety watchdogs, and that is hswatchdogs@pscmail.org. So if you find unsafe work conditions when you're brought back into the workplace, please let us know at that health and safety watchdogs email. Last thing, obviously, if you have been watching any of the live stream, you know that this is a very member-driven organization. Our members are incredible. But I also wanted to shout out real quick the fact that we have a lot of amazing professional staff that work at the PSC who have been helping throughout this event, and of course, many others. So I just wanted to take a second to shout out the organizing staff: Deirdre Brill, the director, Brian Graff, Eric Paul, Jorge Guzman, Janet Kwan, my own amazing organizer at Brooklyn College, Sam Lewis, Sam Raziotis. Also a shout out to our contract enforcement staff: Renee, Greg, Faye, Emma, Pete, thank you very much. Our communications staff: Ari, Fran, Shamail, thank you. In policy and research: Bettina and Tiffany. Great work. And of course, the amazing Ida Chang, without whom none of this could be done. The staff or the administration of PSC is too numerous to list, but I want to especially shout out Naomi and Patricia for your extraordinary work and your support. I know that others have been involved, and thank you very, very much. And then last but not least, then we'll go to our next clip. Thank you to Spark Street. We have Lawrence right now. Megan and Josh have been on as well throughout this marathon. So thank you, Spark Street. Thank you, PSC staff. The next segment that we're going to queue up is footage from an August 19th town hall that the Graduate Center chapter held on the future of the Graduate Center. So let's run that clip, please.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our town hall on the future of the Graduate Center. I'm Lynn Turner, the chapter chair for the Graduate Center PSC, also a doctoral candidate in sociology with many prior years of work within labor and community-based movements. We're here today with the start of our fall semester looming ahead in just a week to flesh out the issues of some issues of urgent concern to Graduate Center faculty, staff, and students, and to the broader community. This will be the beginning of multiple forums for discussion, strategizing, and debate towards confronting the impacts of austerity and budget cuts and casting our vision forward for the university that we need. As we begin, let us also take a second to remember and honor those that we have lost. Nearly 48 CUNY faculty, staff, colleagues, friends, and comrades have perished to the coronavirus pandemic, a list that also includes many Graduate Center faculty, staff, and students. Our university has lost more people than any other in the country, and we don't even actually have the tallies of impacts on CUNY students. We remember them, and we pledge to recommit our struggle together. We also understand that the coronavirus pandemic is but one of multiple pandemics, of chronic underfunding, of austerity, of racial inequity, and more that our university, our students, and our communities confront. Within that context, as we fortify our fight to save lives, save jobs, and save CUNY, it's been maddening that the CUNY administration, rather than taking a firm stand against further neoliberal budget cuts in a system that has already been cut to the bone, often opted for preemptive cuts towards those in the most vulnerable positions, with nearly 3,000 adjunct faculty that teach the majority of undergraduate classes across CUNY not reappointed. Positions of non-teaching adjuncts and college assistants have also been cut, and others relegated to a month-to-month status, putting in danger jobs and health in the midst of a public health crisis. We were dismayed to hear CUNY Chancellor Felix Matos Rodriguez state at a recent higher education hearing that the disbursement of $132 million of CARES Act funds was being withheld under these circumstances. Here at the Graduate Center, we welcome and wish well our new president, Robin Garrell, to her tenure in the midst of this crisis. President Garrell was unable to be here today, but we will be bringing this town hall, which we are recording, to her when we meet and ongoing in our work. Graduate employees teach thousands of classes across CUNY each semester. 1/3 of our doctoral students are tuition only, in which they receive no guaranteed health insurance, instead cobbling together funding and health insurance on a semester by semester basis. $750 million was allocated to providing health insurance to tuition-only fellows in the last contract settlement, yet CUNY has demonstrated little urgency in reaching an agreement towards viable health insurance for these students and for ending these inequities. Graduate employees, regardless of funding, contend with losing employment positions, contingent fellowships, and obstacles placed on our research. International students face ongoing pressure in the midst of hostile federal action. Professional staff, library faculty, college assistants, and NTAs are building health and safety committees to prepare for the potential of reopening. Faculty, department chairs, our teaching and learning center, students, and many others have been grappling with the impacts of the COVID crisis, with distance learning transition and need for budget transparency. We will hear more about these issues today, and we look to organizing around these urgent issues and working with President Garrell to resolve them. Our union has joined together in the CUNY Summer of Struggle, where we've Zoomed, we've caravanned, we've rallied, and we've reached out to our membership on behalf of full funding for CUNY, health and safety issues, including no return without safe return, for no budget cuts, for no job losses, for educational justice, for racial justice, and the demand for CUNY to preserve and protect our health and health insurance amidst the pandemic. As we build to a climax on August 26th, the first day of the semester, our union has detailed 10 essential demands to save lives, save jobs, and save CUNY for our members, our students, and CUNY communities. Should these demands not be met by August 26th, our union has placed all options on the table, including legislative and legal action, militant workplace actions, and preparation for a strike. Join us on August 26th. You'll see the pledge and the registration form for this in the chat, and join us now and welcome again to our town hall today. And with that, I'll pass the baton to our vice chair, Harry Blaine, to lead us through our town hall.
Our goal is to make sure that what they're doing is not just hygiene theater, and that they're actually sharing what improvements are being made. The GC shares the building with Oxford University Press and the other NYPL branch there, right? What effects do more people in those spaces have on our ventilation, right? So there should be transparency from the GC so that we can all understand and make informed decisions. And that if there's less transparency, then people are afraid and distrustful, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we want to make sure that we're able to actually assess and see. And so I think that having transparency about what improvements to the building, the draft plan talked about how, they rearranged furniture and they, put tape on certain bathroom stalls, but these are not actual real facilities improvements. And so we need to have better transparency there.
Don't expect anybody to go back until the PSC is satisfied with what your plan is, not just CUNY Central, but the PSC. I mean, that's the simplest message. It is one that I think that the PSC has been doing a pretty good job of making. They have said numerous times, we're not going back until we negotiate a safe return. So we need to just make sure that that is a statement that has teeth to it. I know that the Taylor law is a tough one, so people are concerned, but as far as I'm concerned, screw the Taylor law. Like, the PSC should be telling faculty and staff, if you're asked to go back before the PSC has approved your message, don't go. That is dangerous, right? Because you are going to be going against a direct order from the school. But if you're asking me personally what we should do as Jerry, rather than as, I'm not a PSC leader, but that's what we should be doing, is saying, no, we will not go back unless our demands are met.
This current moment is simply an extension of CUNY management's pre-existing devaluation of students and educators and graduate workers at the expense of sort of high-level administrative hiring, broader education austerity within CUNY. So I'm Michelle Gaspari. I'm a doctoral student in anthropology, and I'm a co-coordinator for organizing and planning at the CUNY Adjunct Project. And I focus specifically within the CUNY Adjunct Project on the fight to end two-tiered funding of doctoral students at the GC. And this is for a project we call Full and Fair. So I, like 1/3 of all current and incoming doctoral students at the GC, have no funding apart from a 5-year tuition waiver. And some students receive not even that tuition waiver at all. So students who are receiving only tuition waivers or less face disproportionate obstacles to the completion of their programs. We end up scrambling to piece together a living. We're competing for a limited number of adjunct and grad student positions, grad assistant positions, and any of which just get revoked at the last minute. So personally, the GAB that I managed to get last year has been cut, and I've heard of a number of tuition-only colleagues that have also had their fellowships not being renewed in the fall. And international students with tuition-only fellowships, due to their limited work options, that they may only take jobs like adjuncting or fellowships within the CUNY system. So especially now, as we're amid this huge adjunct and fellowship cut and precarity, I want to raise that this is felt very acutely by underfunded students who
What we need to ask the new president is to put a stop to those procedures. Like, what are the other examples of this enterprise-like approach towards universities? So we have what the students at the Graduate Center, jokingly, maybe not, call Krugmanization of the institute. So it's about hiring celebrity faculties, so you would have a more attractive window for the potential customers, usually like MA students who are viewed as money bags, and you want to like attract these students with, as I call them, celebrity faculties, who don't even feel they need to engage with the students. They don't care much about the institution or public education in general, and they are they have high salaries, again, just to have a more decorated, exciting window. The other issue that we have is the Board of Trustees. So this whole idea that the educational system should produce profits, we should cut the unnecessary costs, and these are the decisions made by people who mostly have no idea of education, how education should work. So I'm sure many of you have seen the piece in New York Post a couple of months ago that according to some insider source, claimed that after telling us that the Board of Trustees is planning to sell a number of buildings, CUNY buildings, which I think belong to the New York people. This is a public education system. But the idea was that because the graduate center is usually empty and the classes are only held at night, there's no need for such a building. So we could just sell it and get the money and do something with it. So this is the type of mentality that, again, like has no idea what education is about, how it works, but just wants to administer the whole institution in a way that, as I said, profits are made and the unnecessary costs are cut.
Involved in is I'm an elected member of the Central Faculty Steering Committee, which is a committee of 9 faculty who are centrally appointed, like Michelle and I, where our primary appointments are at the Graduate Center, not on one of the CUNY campuses, to really advise and meet with the president, provost, and other senior officials around a set of issues. And as you might imagine, since COVID happened, it's largely focused on the budget. And what I can say is we, along with the executive officers, there's an executive committee of the executive officers, of which there are probably 35 in total, a mix of centrally appointed faculty, but more typically campus-based faculty. We demanded and got the interim president, Jim Meiskens, to agree to set up what we called the GC Budget Task Force. And that task force was charged with, in effect, advising the administration on exactly how the budget ought to be apportioned with various scenarios moving forward. And the thing that I and my colleagues from the Central Faculty Steering Committee, 3 of the 9 of us, myself and 2 other colleagues, got elected to this committee. And what we're doing on that committee is, in effect, arguing that everything needs related to the academic program, student support, faculty positions, HEOs, all that needs to be held harmless, and that the cuts need to start with the executive compensation plan. And it was very helpful to get the data that the union demanded through an FOIL request. That allowed us to see how dramatically in the last 5 years, and certainly in the last 10 years, the executive compensation plan has grown to about a $4.5 million budget. So we have proposed, our committee, still waiting to hear what Robin Gorel says about this, our committee proposed a series of targeted cuts in the executive compensation plan. Now, be aware, there's no way we can make up even a small budget shortfall cutting executive compensation plan people alone. It's just, there's not enough money there. So what we've argued for is, in times past, what the administration has done is simply bulled ahead and made whatever cuts they wanted to make, regardless of what the impact was on academic programs, on the workers themselves. We're saying, in effect, no more. This has to, stop here with COVID. And then moving forward, we've demanded the formal establishment of a P&B type committee that reports out of the grad council, which has, as we all know, strong faculty and student support. So you can count on us to carry that fight forward. But I think what I have to say is, as positive as that might seem, the potential cuts that are coming are draconian. I mean, and I would say the failure, CUNY's put all its eggs in the HEROES funding, the 4th COVID budget that the Democrats put forward with the HEROES Act. And you see how far that got. As we sit here, that's nowhere. And in effect, what CUNY has done is said, okay, we'll provide interim funding in July, and in August, and now they've even said they'll extend it in September. It doesn't mean that stops the cuts. It means that they're not about to sort of take draconian cuts. But at some point, Andrew Cuomo, who has not taken the 2 whacks at the budget that he has the right to take without any oversight, thanks to the state legislature, he and his minions in the budget office in the state are going to take a major whack at CUNY, because he doesn't like and doesn't support public higher education, especially in the city. So we need this notion of solidarity among all of us, because I think we're going to need at some point to be prepared to go out and demonstrate exactly how opposed we are to what's coming for CUNY. And that may mean that we need to be prepared to go out on strike. I'll stop there and turn it to you.
This summer, I was very concerned that decisions were being made about which we knew nothing. So I just threw together an email to 30 friends. And it was at that point that we discovered that Steve and the Central Line group was having one kind of conversation and the EOs were having another. And most of us were absolutely outside, not anybody's fault. There are no mechanisms at the Graduate Center for knowledge sharing, communication, real conversation, much less participatory decision making or finance or participatory budgeting. I guess I want to make 5-ish points. And I think we need to welcome the new president with an expectation that we, faculty, staff, and students stand in solidarity. That screw with one of our 3-legged stools and you've got to contend with all of us. As a footnote to that, I just want to note that the building is being held together by a very fragile, overburdened, underfunded group of largely women of color who are APOs holding these absolutely mishigas departments that are sprawling across all of CUNY. And it feels like, if I can use acupuncture, they are the pressure point. They are the point where the pressures are entering, where the stress is intense. The potential cuttings of college assistants just makes their jobs that much harder. And I feel like they are getting squeezed. And we've got to be exquisitely attuned to what's happening to the APOs. So solidarity, I think Steve has already said, but when we had those summer sessions, it was very key that the 2 key issues that we all agreed on to fight for was insurance for all graduate students, and maintaining the college assistants. Again, I'm with Steve. I don't know how far it'll go, but certainly the voice of the faculty, and then the faculty voice, I think, influence the voices of the EOs, so that Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that then became clear to the EOs that those are 2 dominant issues we need to be pressing for. I think as a union and as we stand in solidarity, we must be taking a stronger position around what it means to be an anti-racist union. A commitment to recruiting and keeping faculty of color, a commitment to having substantial funding for students of color. I don't think we can treat that as separate from labor, and I don't think you all are, and I don't think we have, but I think labor has, and the PSC and the PSA at the Graduate Center should be on the forefront of all the ways it means to be anti-racist. A third issue we need to be watching for that's happening on other campuses is how austerity, disaster capitalism is being used to cut gender and women's studies or CLAGS or IRIDAC or Middle Eastern studies. And so CUNY has had a good share of Islamophobia entering at the top, and we need to be clear that around content that we're supporting those programs. I think the last two issues I want to mention are a much stronger commitment around participatory budgeting. When this summer, again, the very clear message was cut from the top. As Maya said, and I think Sarah said, don't touch the bottom. Don't touch departments. Don't.
I wanted to thank Steve and Michelle, and especially Michelle, for referencing APOs. I am an APO. I'm an APO in English, for those of you who don't know me. And I appreciate, Michelle, that you and the EO group and Steve's group, the various groups, are centering the work that APOs can do. And I just want to make a call in terms of solidarity and so on, and recognizing the work we do. We are the lowest level of HEOs. Our APOs are the lowest level of HEOs. I always forget if it's AHEOs or HEOAs, but whatever it is, we are at the lowest level, lowest salary range, and that we have to fight to do reclassification or salary differentials, and we don't know what that's going to be available in the coming austerity period. And so while it's lovely to say how important we are to our programs, and I appreciate you fighting for our college assistants, it is often a little bit outside this context distasteful to hear faculty pat us on our heads and tell us how important we are, when why aren't we included in those faculty discussions? Why aren't we? I don't know if you're
Good point.
We shouldn't always separate ourselves.
Yep.
We are the academic officers of the academic programs. We should be connected. And we should also be fighting, all of us, faculty, staff, and graduate student workers, to recognize that those people, that students and faculty and the higher administration, I don't know, every president, every provost tells us we are the heartbeat, we are the skeleton, we are the most important part of the graduate center, and we're the lowest level of HEO. And we need a whole class. I can apply for reclassification. I will probably get it. I work for a wonderful supportive program. I do all kinds of really great things. I would probably, if there's money for it, I would probably get it. But each of us shouldn't have to go through that exercise separately. So thank you so much for the recognition from everybody, all my students who are on here. There's lots of you who always write to me after this saying it was great seeing you on here and being vocal. Fight for us too.
The City University of New York plans to lay off thousands of adjunct faculty and part-time workers and cut thousands of classes. Hurting CUNY means hurting our recovery. CUNY has lifted generations of New Yorkers out of poverty and serves communities hardest hit by this crisis. Essential workers and their families rely on CUNY. And cutting faculty means students may not graduate. Tell CUNY not to turn its back on our city's most vulnerable communities during this crisis. We are in a moment of reckoning. Black and brown New Yorkers have been disproportionately affected by COVID and targeted by racist violence. And in this moment when New York should be investing more in institutions that serve communities of color, the City University of New York plans to cut thousands of classes and lay off thousands of adjunct faculty and part-time workers. CUNY must do better. Don't fail New Yorkers in this crisis.
I'm Sharon Persinger, the PSC Treasurer. I want to talk to you about numbers and money. I'm asking you to do your part to ensure that the communities of New York get the federal resources they need. I'm asking you to complete the census. You can complete the census online, by phone, by mail if you still have the survey. It's easy, and it takes less than 10 minutes. So what does the census have to do with money? More than 130 federal programs distribute a combined $1.5 trillion based on the population counts from the census. Funding for K-12 education, school lunches, hospitals and other medical assistance, highways, public transit, Pell Grants, housing, so much more is determined with census data. Basically, the more New Yorkers who are counted in the census, the more funding New York receives. By completing the census, You'll also be helping to ensure that New York gets the maximum possible representation in Congress. If many New Yorkers are not counted, New York could lose a seat in the House of Representatives. Even in the very best of times, many New Yorkers go uncounted in the census. People of color, immigrants, the poor, the people that CUNY exists to serve are typically undercounted. And of course, these are not the best of times. The door-to-door survey, which is critical for collecting data on these undercounted groups, is being conducted now and goes until September 30th. If you complete the census on your own, you make the job of these census enumerators much easier. So please, fill out the census online, or by phone, or by mail. Encourage your students, your friends, your family, your neighbors to do the same. There's the information. Be counted. Help New York to get the funding it needs and deserves for safety net programs, for infrastructure, for education, and more. Fill out the census.
Yo, the census mean dollars and cents for us. More programming gets funded, more stops in the local bus. The community needs need to be communicated. Be counted, your silence won't get you any consideration. 10,000 people like they never listened to us. Those same 10,000 never gave the census a touch. Didn't give it a glance, didn't give it a chance. And get mad at legislators for not meeting their demands. Demands they never made, demands they never gave. Concerns that might as well be shadows in the shade. A party of one will never get a parade. And numbers this power, be counted, make a change. You need hospitals, let them know. Schools, let them know. Higher education and roads, let them know. The census shape the next 10 years of our life. On a national, local level, let's help them get it right. Let them know, 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 let them know. This is our opportunity to push the narrative and help write our story. The story of America. What is America? Who's here? How are we living? What do we make? What are our challenges? What do we need? Let them know.
Most folks have found their only opportunities for higher education at CUNY. Earlier this week, I wrote an op-ed about how Bronx Community College changed my mother's life. My mom was born in Harlem Hospital in 1953. She descends from slaves and sharecroppers in Georgia and North Carolina. When she was 10 years old, her father became ill and had to stop working construction. So she ended up having to take care of her younger brother and sister while her mother went back to work and was working evening shifts. Her father died when she was a sophomore at Lewis Brandeis High School on the Upper West Side. And she was a marginal student. She did not have solid plans to go to college, but one of her college counselors told her, hey, look, CUNY has free tuition and open admissions. In other words, it guarantees a spot in a community college to any graduating high school senior. You should go to college. Which college do you want to go to? And so she decided to go to Bronx Community College because they had a nursing program. And so she entered in 1971. She had to take semesters off because she couldn't afford books sometimes. And with faculty support, she graduated in 1976. One faculty member devoted 4 full days, like 9 to 5 days, to tutor her so that she could pass a pharmacology exam that was necessary to attain her nursing degree. And if our class sizes balloon as we lay off faculty, we're not going to be able to provide our students with this kind of attention and support that they need and that they deserve, quite frankly. My mom has also paid it forward. She has spent 40 years working with low-income communities of color as a nurse. And I have benefited from her CUNY education because I'm not really sure what my mom's life would be like if she hadn't gone to Bronx Community College. She told me that Bronx Community College changed her life. And she said, I could have been out there. You know, I could have been hanging out. Definitely not working as a nurse, serving people as she is these days. So rather than compromise CUNY and really compromise the futures of the 190,000 plus undergraduates of color that are currently at CUNY, I really hope that our elected officials, our state electeds, will support the SHARE Act, in addition to taking other actions. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing from our electeds.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you for telling your story publicly. And the part that really spoke to me was where you said your mother had a professor who spent 4 days tutoring her one-on-one on pharmacology. That will not happen if CUNY lays off thousands of instructors. I mean, that's really what's at stake, and it's a choice. This choice, are we going to invest so that people like Natalie's mother can succeed, or is CUNY making the decision that those people don't matter? That's really the choice. Who's being prioritized by CUNY, by New York State and New York City? That's the choice that's being made. And so many of our legislators are standing up for the right choice. So I'm eager to hear from them. I understand that the controller, Scott Stringer, is on. I don't see his face, but I think Scott said, there you are. So Scott's going to address us first, and then Eric Adams, if you would speak after the controller, that would be wonderful. And thank you. And I just want to say, I mean, I see Eric Adams is in a car, and who knows where the rest of you are. You've made huge efforts to be here. And just want to say thank you for showing up in every sense of the word. Thank you so much. Scott.
Well, thank you, Barbara. And let me start out. I on the Zoom, I see Senator Liu and the Assembly Member Cruz and Borough President Adams. Drive safely. Can't see you, but drive safely. Look, I wanted to be on today because I wanted to make it clear that while we are dealing with serious fiscal issues in the state and the city, no doubt about it, the question going forward is, how do we assure that we don't balance budgets and spreadsheets on the back of struggling students? Too many people have suggested cutting summer jobs for teens. Too many people are talking about furloughing frontline workers who are risking their lives every day. And now the failure to commit to a CUNY plan that's actually going to require more resources as we think about distance learning and the new way we imagine the university system. CUNY is at the epicenter of all that's possible for so many kids, Black and brown kids, kids who come from struggling families, people who were able to access CUNY like myself and created a better life for families. This is not something that we should ignore. And Barbara, you and your union has been at the front lines with the adjuncts, the professors, the people who come to CUNY as if it's a life mission, because it is. It's about learning, but it's also about thinking about a just and humane society. And if we've learned anything in the last few weeks, from systemic racism to wrong ways to fund police departments where we leave nothing to reinvest in our communities, is senseless. And anybody harming the mission of CUNY, that's the biggest mistake of all. So I wanted to be on this call to reaffirm my support for CUNY, to reaffirm my support for the thousands of workers, frontline education workers, our professors, our adjuncts, all the people who make up the CUNY family. I stand with you, and I stand with you as the person who counts the dollars and cents and the money. And quite frankly, there's two ways to deal with money. You reinvest, and you make sure that bureaucracy gets cut so that you don't have to cut the core mission of so many important institutions like the CUNY education system. So I'm glad to be here with you, Barbara, and all of my colleagues to say fund CUNY and don't lay off one single person, or you can't do that.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. And yes, don't lay off one single person in this crisis. bring on more. Thank you so much for your support. And now I see that the borough president is in his office, maybe, and I think you are ready now to speak to us. So perhaps we could call on Eric Adams, the Brooklyn Borough President, if he's available to speak. Thank you, and thank you again, Scott, for the continuing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And you're right when you said I am in my office, because my vehicle has become my new office as I move around the city and deal with not only the onslaught of coronavirus, but really the real call and righteous call to deal with reforming our police department. And as we engage in this real conversation about removing the knee off the necks of countless number of people of color, clearly there's no more significant place than education. I am a two-time CUNY grad. The life I am living right now clearly was impacted because of my ability to attend CUNY, my ability to ensure that my son had a quality education came from the foundation that I received from CUNY. So when you think about what happens in CUNY, we cannot just talk about one generation, as it was just shared. It is generational. And that's why I was pleased to join today to sign on to a support letter to William Thompson, the chairperson of the Board of Trustees of the City of New York, calling to halt these calls. I think it was so important for it to do, as he is the chancellor of the City University of New York. It's important for us to focus on that. Not only that, as we see millions of people marching around the globe to deal with rights, it's the most fundamental and significant right is the right that what happens to access to education. Thousands of CUNY adjunct faculty and hourly employees are expected to be laid off June 30. This cannot happen. It's going to reduce class courses. It's going to reduce access to education for our students. And then when you add the $320 projected increase in tuition, with further aggravating of the ability to receive education. I spoke with a countless number of CUNY students, and they shared with me, and as I moved throughout the city, how this has traumatized them through coronavirus, and how we don't need to continue to traumatize their educational experience. And something is very interesting that people often ignore. When I go and participate with marches for housing and speak to people who are there, you know who they are? Oftentimes they're CUNY students. When I talk about access to healthcare and fighting for the rights of healthcare, I find students, CUNY students, leading the conversation. As I march through the streets during the Black Lives Matter movement, the diversity of the marches, and I talk to the young people who are there, again, I find CUNY students. CUNY students are not only in the classrooms, they are in the classrooms of life. They are at the forefront of the major issues that we are fighting for. They're learning more than the academics of college. They're learning how to be better citizens. And I think it's imperative that we do all that's possible. And lastly, the federal government, through our congressional delegation, was clear when they allocated through the CARES Act $100 million to CUNY for institutional support during this crisis. There were clear provisions of not laying off staff, not furloughing staff. CUNY needs to come up with a plan of how they're going to adhere to those provisions. We need to protect staff, because by protecting staff, we will protect courses, and by protecting courses, we will protect our future generations to come. I thank you for what you and your team at PSC what you are doing. We are your partners here. I'm not only your partner because I think it's important, borrowing from Hair Club for Men commercial. I am not only a client, I'm one of the participants that benefited from the CUNY system, and I thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Borough President. Thank you so much for all you're doing right now. There you are again. We get to see you. And also for your support. And you're absolutely right about the CARES Act money. CUNY should be keeping people on payroll. That is a mandate in that funding. So thank you so much. And we thank you for your work. You're right about the classroom of the streets. So I'd like to call on next. I think I can see you all. Assembly Member Mosley, Walter Mosley, I saw you a minute ago. If you can join us. And I will say that I know not all the legislators can stay for the whole time, but after the legislators speak, we do have press questions, I believe. So if you can stay, that's great. If not, we'll make sure that message is sent out so everyone can see. So Assembly Member Mosley, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for PSC for giving me this opportunity, and thank you to my colleagues who are on this Zoom call. You know, just like in 2008 and 2009, where we saw CUNY step into the dam to fill the need for so many college students who saw CUNY as an alternative to going to college, a viable alternative, not only to the quality of education that they were going to experience in the next 4 years of their lives, but it was a viable alternative in terms of cost. It was a viable alternative in terms of the quality of educators and professors and administration, and in anticipation of what we know is to come, and that's probably a deep recession in lieu of everything that we've experienced over this past few several months, that CUNY will again step into that dam. They will step into that gap where students would have gone to other colleges and universities all throughout the country. They'll look at CUNY now more than ever as a viable option towards, number one, meeting their needs in terms of a cost, but also providing a quality education that they would have received in any other university throughout the globe. So now is not a time to make cuts. Now is not a time to not invest in our young people. Now is a time more than ever to double down, to make sure that we provide all the resources and provisions that are necessary for CUNY to thrive in anticipation of the onslaught of students that are going to be looking to go to college at a cost that's sustainable to their families, while at the same time not lacking the necessary rigor as well as expectation in terms of quality of education that they will receive during their 4 years of undergraduate or in their graduate studies. So I call on my colleagues, I call on our executive to hold off on these budget cuts, understanding that now more than ever we need to invest and not divest out of CUNY, but invest in CUNY, not just talking about the bricks and mortars, but the people who actually make the university and college campuses what it is. I represent Medgar Evers College, and now more than ever, we need to be supportive of Medgar Evers and all that they're trying to do in terms of providing a quality education for the young men and women of Central Brooklyn. So again, thank you, Barbara, for this opportunity, and I look forward to a rigorous discussion following these presentations.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the emphasis on the quality of education at CUNY and sustaining that quality. It's not just about access and having access to education. It's about a rigorous education, which we are committed to. So thank you. I think we had planned for Senator Andrew Gennardis to speak next, but I'm not sure he's on. This is not perfect technology. So I don't yet. He's not on yet. Okay, so we'll welcome him when he does come on. I did see Assembly Member Yulin New, and I'm wondering if you would address us next. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me and for letting me take a couple moments to say a couple of words today. I just wanted to say that I'm always happy to do anything with CUNY because, as some of the folks here may know, I'm actually a CUNY Baruch alumni. I just wanted to say go Bearcats. I know that's a real animal and not at all shaped like our symbol, but it's okay. As we all know, this year, amid the global pandemic, our state legislature actually passed an austerity budget, and I talked a lot about it, that severely cut funding to healthcare, housing, and education. And back when we were voting on the budget, I said in my floor speech that when we cut deeply into our school budgets, it means layoffs for teachers and educational professionals, and when especially and the kids are the ones that will need them more than ever, right? It's like when we are needing our education professionals more than ever, we are getting those cuts. Along with the pandemic and the austerity budget, the systemic racism that has long existed in our society has been coming to light in a very major way after especially the horrible murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and so many others. And I just want to say that these are all important conversations that we have separately, but also every single one of them relates to each other. CUNY has actually long provided education to people from all over New York and all over the country. Folks don't know this, but I actually got a fellowship to CUNY, and that's the reason why I'm in New York in the first place. I came from Washington State, and improper funding of CUNY is really, like, we can call it out. It's a part of the systemic racism that we see all throughout our society and throughout our system. CUNY is able to provide so many New Yorkers an education and a necessary skill set that they will be able to use later to get a job, provide for themselves and their families. And I just want to put this statistic out there for folks, but nearly 80% of CUNY students are people of color, as Natalie spoke earlier. Students of color, and removing this resource from an already underserved community would be devastating. I wouldn't have been able to pay for my college education. I wouldn't have been able to actually, get my master's degree if it wasn't for CUNY and for the fellowship and for this system that has been set up to help students of color in particular. CUNY has been and continues to be a key resource in allowing for all New Yorkers to seek and to be able to get these skills. If we reduce class sizes, if we reduce classes offered or the number of staff, we are taking away this important resource as we are trying to rebuild after this pandemic, and it's a key resource for so many of us. Because of the budget cuts, several CUNY campuses are actually planning to let go of adjunct faculty and part-time staff. This is really hugely negatively impacting the students and staff and faculty who face losing their jobs and health insurance amid this pandemic. These layoffs also mean that classes will get bigger and there will be a reduced course offering, and there's going to be a huge model change for CUNY that CUNY has actually strived for to make sure that we have so many diverse classes. And I think that it's really important that we are preserving these things. The budget cuts that CUNY already has faced after the budget was approved will be already hard enough to work with in the coming months and years. And we have to fight to ensure that our institutions like CUNY are given a fighting chance to provide services that our community so deeply needs. And we need to fully fund our CUNY system, because investing in our students right now is actually investing in New York's recovery. I know that that's like, it's hard to even, think about the fact that we're putting people into cycles of debt right now. We're trapping people into cycles of debt right now. There's people who can't pay rent, can't pay for the food on their table, and now it's even harder and harder and harder. We're supposed to be investing in the things that can help us recover. We're not supposed to be taking away and making cuts to the things that will help us to recover. So I want to thank everyone for speaking today and for fighting alongside, CUNY and students like me, to ensure that our institutions like CUNY, who provided such needed services and support for our community, are able to get the funding that we so desperately need to see. Because without the students, without the staff, without the right amounts of funding, I think that we will be actually impeding, we'll be standing in the way of our own recovery. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assembly Member. That's absolutely right. This is about recovery and transformation to a better New York, not recovering the old normal, but creating a new and better New York. Senator Lieu, I think, had to get off, and I'm apologizing. He wrote, Senator Lieu, I think you had to go. I apologize for that. I guess there was a problem with the timing, but I'll just take a minute and read what he said, because Senator Liu has been such a strong supporter at every point of this fight. He says, CUNY is our asset, more vital than ever, with much unrest here at home and around the nation. The governor has threatened huge cuts, which will hit adjuncts and other faculty disproportionately, ultimately hurting students and our city's futures. Similar point to what we just heard. We are hoping for federal assistance for the huge revenue shortfalls, but also are ready with legislative proposals to raise revenue. And Senator Liu adds that voice, as he has added very important points throughout this fight. I hope that we were able to be joined by the chair of the City Council Committee on Higher Education, Inez Barron. I don't know if Inez was able to get on, but Inez, I don't see you. So we'll go to a great longstanding champion of PSC and of CUNY students, faculty, and staff, Assembly Member Epstein. Harvey Epstein.
Thank you, Barbara. I want to thank you all for really raising this issue up in the middle of a fight against systemic racism. We all know that the pathway for people is through education, college education. And, you know, as a CUNY alum myself, my father went to CUNY. These were the pathways out for all of us. And I am privileged to be, you know, in a society of white, my white maleness doesn't impact me as ways it does people of color, but CUNY still allowed my family to get through the system. Now, the idea of doing cuts in the middle of this is outrageous. We need to invest. We need to have resources. And how do we do that? Well, federal dollars may or may not come. The state has to step up no matter what. The state and the city has to say, we will ensure that high income earners pay more so our CUNY system can function. The city can do it right now by increasing the tax rate. Right now, if you're a millionaire, half millionaire, or multi-billionaire, you only pay 3.34% of your income towards tax. That could be 4%, 5%, 6%, from 5 million to 10 million, from 10 million to 20 million. Same thing on the state level. We could raise, you know, the highest is 8.82%. We could say that's 9.2% or 10 or 12. But why shouldn't someone who makes $1 million be different than someone who makes 10 million or 100 million? We need revenue, other sources of revenue. People who are these private equity companies who use all this mezzanine debt. They pay no taxes, even though you and I, when we want to buy a house, have to pay a mortgage recording tax. And there's pied-à-terre tax, stock transfer tax, revenue after revenue options are on the table. And New York City and New York State must step up, because if we do not fund CUNY, we're going to lose another generation. CUNY is a pathway out. CUNY is the opportunity out. And the real question we have to answer is when more and more people are going to want to go to college, because obviously, you know, other employment opportunities might not be available with 4 million New Yorkers doing poorly, you know, being unemployed right now. Their path might be to go back to school. We want to encourage that. We want to support that. And there's no way to do that by cutting faculty at CUNY. No way to do that by saying there won't be resources. No way to do that saying there won't be paper or libraries or other structural needs that students have. And we need to ensure that we invest in CUNY, and we invest in CUNY now. We will continue to fight for you. I encourage you all to be part of our budget justice movement. I know PSC has been a leader there. We want everyone involved to say to our state elected, to our governor, invest now, no cuts. If you do cuts, it'll destroy the system. I encourage us to be a part of strategy that talks about revenue. Thank you all for your due, and I'll continue to fight with you.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Harvey, and to all the legislators who've been on. It's so important what you say about new sources of revenue. These are choices, and I think of something Reverend William Barber said about the not unintentional differences between healthcare for people of color and Black people specifically and other Americans. The defunding of CUNY is not unintentional. And we need to change that situation and change that intention, especially at this moment of need for recovery for all of us. And especially for the need to invest for a change in resources that serve the communities that have been hardest hit for generations by racism, by COVID, by this income inequality and now by the economic crisis. So this is the moment for CUNY, and that's why it's so valuable to us that you're stepping up. I do want to say that several other colleagues of yours, as you know, have signed on to these letters of support, other borough presidents, Queens Borough President and others, and we'll soon be proudly releasing that. The deadline for CUNY to notify of not appointing adjuncts and other instructors is June 30th, so we'll be releasing that before then, and calling on all your power and the power that was exhibited here today to fight back. So I think now we will turn it over to some questions that have come in from the press and elsewhere. But just before that, I do that, I'll ask Tiffany Brown to remind folks of how they can tweet out what they're hearing and also tag the legislators who've spoken. Tiffany?
Hi, everyone. So yes, we will be using the hashtag #CutCovid-NotCUNY, and we will also be using the hashtag CUNY Summer of Struggle, and you can tweet at several of the elected members that were on the press conference and use the Q&A function to insert your questions. We'll be leading with press questions as well as some questions from our members. We have currently 577 people on, so we thank you. And we're going to turn it over to some questions now, Barbara.
Great. So do you want to read the first press question, and then we'll turn it to the panelists to address it?
Okay. Give me one moment.
Okay.
Hi, Barbara, and hi, everybody. This is Andrea Vasquez, First VP. I was just jumping in. I also just wanted to say that press have requested a recording of this, so they didn't put in all their questions. But I also wanted to thank the presenters and repeat something, an announcement that Barbara made much earlier about next Tuesday. And we invite all of you, and we had over 600 people earlier on this call, and I'm sure more are coming and going. But on Tuesday, the 23rd, we're going to have an action, a virtual and a physical action, making the connection between Cuomo and CUNY by lining up, by having everyone line up and hold a poster between them or a bandana between them, a safe action. But we hope to get just as many people involved as we have here today. So I urge everyone to join. Thank you.
Stand together for CUNY. Okay, back to Tiffany. First question. Tiffany.
Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay. So the first question comes from Sari Kalinsky. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. My Queens College students' families have been devastated by the pandemic, personally and financially. What can we do to ensure that auxiliary programs such as SEEK, mentoring, advising, etc., that help get vulnerable students to graduation are protected?
Right. So I'll see if any of the legislators want to tackle that. What can the programs, speaking about the special programs, sometimes called the opportunity programs at CUNY, that are so important to bring in students who otherwise might not come to college and certainly might not stay because of the need for extra support. What can we do to make sure those programs are protected? Any legislators want to speak to that?
I can say quickly, we kept the funding in this year in the budget. We are, in the Assembly, we're deeply committed to those programs. If the governor proposes any cuts in those programs, we will push back. And I think this is a conversation that we all need to have with the governor. He's the one who's going to propose additional cuts. He's the one who's going to propose anything that's going to be a cut, and we need to ensure that doesn't happen by ensuring there's revenue. And that's only just to get the baseline where we are today. We need more resources, and that requires additional revenue. But he's proposing potentially 20% cuts across the board, and we need to ensure that these programs don't get cut at all. If anything, they should be enhanced.
Great, thank you. Tiffany, next question, or?
The second question we have is in regards to taxing the rich. Will the millionaire tax be passed?
Will the millionaire's tax be passed? We'll turn that to Harvey Epstein again, and then I have a question I'd like to ask the borough president. Harvey?
It's really up to everyone on this call. The 600 people on this call will make the decision about whether we can pass a multimillionaire and billionaire's tax. Because we have the votes, I believe, in the Assembly. It'll be a little tougher in the Senate. And the real question is, the governor had a bottom line in March in the budget, and he didn't want to raise revenue on high-income earners. And the question you have to answer today is whether you're going to push so hard on the governor that he has no choice. We repealed 50A, and the governor signed the bill because it was overwhelming support for doing that. The movement said, you need to repeal 50A, and we had the ability to do that this week. We will get revenue and tax millionaires and billionaires if the movement is so strong that governor can't ignore you. You need to be the agents of change here. I know we want to do it. We just need your help.
All right, thank you. And 50A is the law about disclosure of previous police misconduct allegations.
This is Yulene. I just wanted to add to what Harvey was saying a little bit and just basically say that, yes, it's true that we need to build momentum for revenue building. I think more than ever, we have to be fighting to say that it's unacceptable that we have, cut healthcare, cut housing, cut education in a time when we need these things more than ever. Healthcare right now is in a global pandemic. How could we cut healthcare in a global pandemic? How can we be cutting education when our kids are not able to go to school? Like, how can we do these things in such a devastating way when there are things that we need to be responsible for? The state should have been that cushion. The state should have been that cushion for the economic recovery to come, and the state needed to make sure that we were actually putting the funding in the right places in the right moments, because this is the time to be able to invest. And as Barbara was saying, we need transformative change. We can't just be, allowing for the Band-Aids to come, because we have so many Band-Aids on. We can't even see the patient anymore. We literally, we have to take the chance right now to make transformative change. The system that we are operating in is racist. And we need to change it. There's the fact that, the Excelsior program, all of these different things like that we allowed to happen, but yet we didn't increase TAP. But, these are all things that are just mind-blowing. 80% of the students in CUNY are students of color. What is going on? We have to ask that question. Why are we kicked to the curb when we actually can just raise revenue and make sure to fund the things that we desperately need? Never in history has there been a recession where we did not raise revenue. Only now.
I think that says it all. Thank you. Thank you so much for speaking so powerfully. Thank you. I wanted to ask the borough president a question, but I think he had to drop off. Sometimes hard to find everyone on these calls. So I do thank him. One thing I do want to talk about is the fact that we've had support from borough presidents right here in the city. Very important to leverage that support, because as Yulin New just said, and Harvey and others, this is exactly the wrong moment to make these cuts, and it signifies a decision to harm people, to say that certain lives matter more than others. That's what the cuts are about, to say Black lives don't matter and that certain lives matter more than others. And that's the decision we are challenging. I'm wondering if we could have another question, and then I might ask one for Professor Natalie Bumpina. Tiffany, do we have another question?
Yes. Can you clarify the status of the CARES Act money? Has it been distributed? Has it not been spent yet?
Great question. The CARES Act is the third COVID stimulus bill that was signed into law on March 27th, and it includes $2.3 trillion, and it includes specific funding, about $14 billion for higher education. And that money is allocated on the basis of it's allocated to colleges. It's not allocated to states or to whole university systems, but to colleges. And it's allocated on the basis of the number of students in the college and the number of students who are Pell recipients, Pell grants, and additional funding for minority serving institutions, as they call them in the federal language. So the total for CUNY actually is about $251 million. About half of that is by law required to be spent in direct grants to students. CUNY Vice Chancellor testified the other day at a hearing that Inez Barron held that CUNY has received the portion of the money that is to be distributed to students. That's about half. It's a little technical, but about half of it. And they have begun, I'm not sure if they finished that distribution. The second half is what's called institutional money for institutional support, and they have not, we're asking right now, but to the best of any information CUNY has provided, and they've been completely non-transparent about this, completely non-transparent. That money has not been received yet. There's a process that involves the state. That's the money, I think it was, one of our speakers spoke earlier about that. In the CARES Act legislation, there's a provision that calls on any higher education institution that receives any of the funding under the CARES Act Education Fund that says that they shall, which means they must, to the greatest extent practicable, keep all employees on payroll during the pandemic crisis. And we are calling on CUNY to heed that. That is not a recommendation. That is not a wish. That is a requirement. And announcing layoffs that are planned for thousands of people does not qualify as keeping people on payroll to the greatest extent practicable. So we are calling on CUNY to use those funds to keep people on payroll, and not just to keep people on payroll, but to allow them to serve the communities that we've been discussing today. That's why people need to stay on payroll for their own lives. And I want to say that the adjunct instructors who are whose vulnerability is being exploited by the CUNY administration in this crisis, CUNY would not have survived years of racist disinvestment if it were not for the willingness of adjunct faculty and other part-timers in particular, and all of us, to do much more than we're paid for, but particularly for adjunct faculty to keep teaching at CUNY, despite the underfunding and despite very tough conditions and very modest pay. And for CUNY now, in this crisis, to take advantage of that system of contingency to say we plan to lay off thousands of people is really despicable. It should not happen. And that's why we're so glad to have the support of everyone here, and why we need you on the street on Tuesday, June 23rd, and supporting that call on CUNY. Do not lay off a single person. We heard that here today. So thank you. Thanks, Yulin. Great question. Tiffany, next one, and we'll take a few more before wrapping up. Maybe one or two more.
Next question is, what can we do to get the person that is not here, but is really the only one who has the power to stop these layoffs and appropriately fund CUNY to do the right thing? And this person is referring to Cuomo.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good question. I might see if any of our legislators want to speak to that, if they're still on.
I would say that when there are cuts that are so devastating, the legislature can and should come back and actually say that we're not going to accept those cuts. That is actually a possibility right now with the things that are going on. Unfortunately, we, and I voted against this, but the legislature did give up a lot of their own powers to the executive during this crisis. And I think that that is including a lot of the budgeting power. And they did say to us in the chambers that if there are cuts that are so devastating that we cannot take them, that we can vote against them, and we can call that out. So I would say that actually the legislature can do certain things, and I would encourage anybody who cares about CUNY to make those calls and fight for CUNY funding. This is one of the cuts that I think would be devastating to the recovery of New York.
Thank you. Let me ask one of Professor Natalie Bumpvina. I wonder if you would talk for a minute about what it's been like teaching in this semester of COVID, and the whether you have seen the strain on your students of this moment in all of its intersecting parts, and how you've seen that, or if you've seen that in the classroom and with students. So I think we need to unmute Natalie. Whoops. Fran, can you unmute Natalie? Or we'll give her a chance. There you go. Go ahead, please.
Right. I think all of my colleagues who are on the call right now can identify with probably what I was feeling during the semester. First of all, I just got an antibody test and it confirmed that I had COVID. So I was teaching with COVID at the end of March and early April. And at the time, a lot of my students also had COVID. Students of mine had symptoms of COVID before we went online. So in early March, there were students of mine who were out. And then in March and April, I had students who were sick. One of my students, who was a top student in my class before the online transition, effectively disappeared and eventually reached out to me and let me know that basically everyone in her family except her had tested positive, and her father had a very serious case. Another student of mine who somehow stuck it out with the class and kept on going, and Lisa, she is, as like my mother was, essentially responsible for her younger brother's care. So in addition to her coursework, was managing his 8th grade education, which had moved on to Google Classroom. And meanwhile, her mother was a patient care technician at Brooklyn Hospital, which we know was ground zero for COVID in Brooklyn. Other students of mine lost their jobs, but then there were those who were the essential workers and had to keep working. So I had a student who missed his final, and I followed up with him and we made arrangements, but he just said he forgot because he had to go to work. So it has hit Queens College very hard, and I know that it's hit our sister campuses in CUNY very hard as well.
Thank you so much. I got a message from City Council Chair of Higher Ed, Barron. I don't think Inez is able to be on the call, but she wanted to send her support. And certainly Inez has been a tremendous and vocal supporter of the need for investment in CUNY, and especially. So thank you. Very important to hear what you said, Natalie, about our students and you. I'm glad you're better. I'm glad you're better. I think we have one last press question from.
Here.
Yes. Oh, great. There you are. Can you say?
Hi. Yeah, I've been on the call for at least a half an hour.
Great.
I'm able to do the visual now. And I just wanted to know that I continue to be supportive, and I continue to appreciate all that CUNY is and what they do. You know, I'm a CUNY alum. You know that CUNY is very dear to my heart. And you know that I try to continue to make sure that I hold their feet to the fire in all regards, in terms of hiring, in terms of maintaining the faculty, and in terms of bringing in representative Black and Latinos to be able to have models for our students to look at. So we did have a hearing, as you said, and we are continuing to hold their feet to the fire. There's lots of negotiations that are going on, and we want to make sure that particularly the CARES money that is obvious and apparent and transparent is sent to those areas and to those needs that are essential. And yes, there is money that has to go to students, but then there's money that has to go to the institutions themselves. And that money, we are saying, should be, in fact, used to maintain the adjunct faculty that does so much. If we talk about cutting the adjuncts, we will have reduced course offerings, and it will prolong the time that students will need to be able to graduate. So I continue to support you, hope to be able to do other things as well, bring the pressure so that we can have CUNY stay true to its mission, And of course, we've got to continue to put the pressure on the administration and on, someone mentioned it, the governor. Yes. The governor. And we've got to support those legislators in Albany to give them the strength to stand up to the governor and do what's right on behalf of the people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Inez. Thanks for your constant advocacy. Thank you. We have so many questions. It's just about one. I'm going to see if we could maybe do more questions to wrap us up. There are still 500 who have questions, and there's also some press questions. So Tiffany, and also I think Senator Gennardis might have joined us. So let's see first if he has joined us. It's great we could do this virtually. There's Senator. It's a lot better when I could actually see you, standing in front of City Hall, what we usually do. But there is Senator Gurnardis. So I'm thrilled to hear from you. You've been so strong supporting us. So let's hear from Senator Gurnardis, then we'll take one last question. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Barbara. Hello, everyone. Sorry I was a little delayed in getting on, some technical difficulties. But really happy to be here in support of a strong and fully funded CUNY. We know, like we've had these conversations for the last couple of months. We know that the best way to help us get through the post-COVID recovery is to be investing in our institutions of higher education. And here in New York City, that means CUNY. No questions asked. This is not the time for budget cuts. This is not the time for layoffs. This is not the time to be disinvesting from the human capital necessary to get us out of this moment and also prepare us for the next moment. There was a great editorial op-ed in the Times, I think it was last weekend, about how important fully funded, free public higher education is towards a post-COVID world. And especially with the lens of what we've seen over the last 2 weeks, knowing that this is an economic engine of opportunity for so many of our students of color across the city, this is not the time to even be contemplating cuts to CUNY. So I stand proud to be here with you as a CUNY graduate, as a adjunct professor myself, as someone whose parents met at Brooklyn College. I wouldn't be here were it not for Brooklyn College. We will do everything in our power to make sure that we are continuing to invest in this world-class gem of an institution that we have here in the city and not let it take any step back with the budget. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And thanks for your support constantly. I do want to say that Senator Gurnardis and all the others who've spoken today have signed our letter calling on the CUNY Board of Trustees Chairman Bill Thompson and on the Chancellor of CUNY, Felix Matos Rodriguez, to do the right thing and stand up. There is still a chance. There are 2 weeks left before these cuts are supposed to come through. Stand up and do the right thing. And we will be publicizing that letter, and along with your names, the names of many other colleagues. We need to keep that pressure on. I think we have one last press conference that I think press question that I think we can take, Tiffany, and then I know we need to wrap it up. So one more, Tiffany.
Yep. When will CUNY address staff-related issues caused by remote operations, including not losing earned leave that is set to expire at the end of the academic year? We are doing more work, and it is even harder now that we are in remote operations. Is state action possible on this issue?
Okay, interesting about state action. I might leave it to some of our state speakers here, and also if there, I thought we had a press question. That sounds like a member question, but let's address that one. Let me say something about the internal, and then if there's anyone in the state, I think a very interesting question, can the state do anything? We, as the union, we're entitled to contract to reopen, well, I wouldn't say reopen, to enter into what's called impact bargaining, which is a legal framework that we have as the union, which is the right to bargain, collectively bargain with CUNY, even though our contract is settled, to bargain over the impact of the change conditions in work that have been imposed by the crisis, imposed by the state, the city, and CUNY administration, and how they affect members. We actually had an impact bargaining session yesterday. One of the issues raised was one mentioned about the effect on our staff. We represent teaching faculty, but we also represent 6,000 or more professional staff. The people who work in the registrar's office, the financial aid counselors, the IT staff, the college laboratory technicians, the advisors and counselors who are absolutely essential and who have been really on the front lines during this crisis, doing the work of trying to keep students engaged and enrolled, as we heard from Professor Vina earlier. The staff have been essential, and their conditions of work were changed overnight. Everybody had to adjust instantly, and many things still need to be fixed in terms of provisions that the staff have in their contract that have to be changed. And we are in the process of bargaining with CUNY. It needs to go a lot faster. And if we didn't have to fight over keeping people in their jobs, the most basic thing, we might be able to do more of that bargaining. But instead, we are fighting at the same time for keeping people employed. And that bargaining has been going on. We had a session yesterday. We have another one next week, pushing to make sure that our hardworking staff at CUNY, who are here because of the mission, as Scott Stringer said at the beginning of the hour, here because of the mission, that our staff have decent conditions themselves, are not taken advantage of, and are here to be able to continue to invest in CUNY and serve in the years to come, so that people are not completely abused and burned out by this really demanding process. So there was a question, was there anything at the state level that could be done? And I'm just wondering if any of our state legislators want to say a word about things that you see yourselves doing in regard to that.
Sure, I'll start off, and I think as I joined the call, I heard the Assemblywoman talk about this as well. And we have an obligation as legislators to go back and make sure that we disapprove any of the budget cuts that kind of snowball the process that leads to to what Barbara was just talking about. So I think that is for sure a no-brainer. We absolutely need to go back. We need to make sure that we are going to stop any of those cuts from a legislative perspective. We have that power. We have that authority to do so. But it's a challenge because we still don't even have the full picture. We still have not been given all of the information that we need so that we can be smart, thoughtful advocates and co-equal partners in government to be able to help solve these problems. Like, we're in government because we want to try to fix a system that is broken and make it better for everyone. We can't do that if we don't have all of the information at our fingertips, especially in light of the circumstances we're facing. So we're not even being allowed to come to the table to help contribute to the solutions here, which is incredibly frustrating and something that we are still pushing for and advocating for and trying to get this information. So this way we can say, okay, here are what the numbers are. Here's our way and our ideas of how to get back and make sure that we can staunch the worst of these cuts moving forward.
Thank you. Yulin? I think Yulin wanted to say something. No. Yulin, you want to say anything?
He covered it. He covered it perfectly.
Andrea?
I just wanted to give a big shout out to Univision, Labor Press, Politico, the city, Riverdale, AM New York, and Kings County politics who are on the call with us. And there's been a lot of tweeting. We support that and check the Q&A for ways to help now. There's a question about police and policing that I hope we can take next.
Yeah. Okay, that'll be our last one. So please, Tiffany.
Yes, so the next question is, does PSC/CUNY support defunding the police? Would PSC-CUNY want some of those funds directed to the CUNY budget to save its faculty?
Yes, and yes. Last night at the PSC Executive Council, we passed a resolution calling for a redirection of a portion of the funding, and we called for $1 billion of the $6 billion that go to NYPD to be redirected to resources that serve communities of color, that show that Black Lives Matter, and that invest in the futures of the people we're privileged to serve at CUNY. That resolution will come to our bigger group, the delegates, in 2 weeks. But I think that given the intensity of our members' support for that position that they've expressed in the streets and writing to us, the support we've had for the statement we put out about the murder of George Floyd, and the long history of our members fighting racism. There are people who came to CUNY out of the civil rights struggle and are still at CUNY that we're privileged to teach with. So I'm confident that our members will support that resolution. So yes, the PSC now has a position on record calling for defunding of the police, which is generally taken to mean reducing funding and redirecting funding towards resources exactly like CUNY. And I think one good way of putting it came from actually one of our members who writes about this, Alex Vitale, who's a professor at Brooklyn College, talks about non-police solutions to issues in society. There's no reason that police have to be used and people have to be criminalized to address solutions such as poverty and domestic struggles And so we are calling for non-police solutions and putting that investment into institutions like CUNY. I mean, CUNY in particular was created through a referendum in 1847, specifically to address the possibility of the radical experiment of educating the children of the people, the children of the whole people, sitting side by side. And that's where the money should go. So absolutely, we have that position. So maybe that's a good place to end. A very important question. Thank you so much. And I want to say to PSC members, first, I want to thank the legislators who were here for your support and courage and passion. Thank you so much. And thank your colleagues. It's great to be able to see you. And I want to say to the PSC members who are on, we have something to fight for. We are really fortunate in this moment to be able to have an institution that could play a role in not only economic recovery, but moral recovery, social and political recovery of our city and our world. It could. It doesn't always play that role, but it could. And we have the position, the privileged position in a way to have that to fight for. We also have each other to fight for. Not every job is on the line yet in the same way, but we will only solve this if we all fight together. So I feel very lucky to be in my position at this moment and very privileged to be with all of you. So I call on all of us. You've been called on already today. I call on all of us. This is our fight for each other, for the future, for our students, for a different world, and let's get busy. And I will see you on June 23rd. So thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves. Stay well. Take care. Bye.